Welcome to Spirited Straight Talk, the podcast to help you thrive with the help of spirit. I'm Deb Shepard, psychic medium, spiritual teacher, and author. Each week, I bring new insights to help you heal from loss, connect with spirit, and turn setbacks into triumphs. So let's get started. I'm sitting here with my wife, Dana, today. And we are going to talk about something that comes up a lot in the work that we do. And it's how do we handle regret after a loved one has died? And been a medium for way over 2 decades. And part of that is there are 5 stages to grief, and they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And part of those 5 stages can include everything in life that we have grief on. So a divorce, a loss of a job, our health, any sort of change, even if it's a good change, sometimes we can go through layers of grief. Regret is intertwined with all those things because that regret gives us guilt. It has us feel not worthy. Maybe it affects many other things in our life that comes up.
It brings shame.
Brings so much shame.
Mm-hmm.
And the death can be someone very close to us, or it can be a significant loss. Maybe one of your first losses that you're trying to understand what you believe about maybe death and dying in a situation. If you've had a relationship that was strained for whatever reason, and you felt like them or yourself weren't able to, come to terms to deal with it, to have that closure. The times where we have someone that passes really unexpectedly, whether it's they died by suicide or an accident, a heart attack, any type of thing that we are so unprepared for.
Mm-hmm.
We will not always just look at the passing, but our entire relationship with that person.
Right.
And go back and have those regrets. And then we're not able to have the healing that we may want to have with them and find that peace. So there's so many layers.
Right. I was just going to say, I've seen so many people come see you because of all the layers of regret that they have at whatever situation was going on with their loved one.
And there's a lot of them. Yeah, there's a lot of things. So there are some tools to help not so much move on, but come to some better terms so the healing can take place. Because as we've talked about, hiring a medium helps you know that there is a connection. It helps with the healing process. But my intention always is for you to open yourself up to hear from your own loved ones and have those connections. And when we have a lot of regret, which, adds to the guilt and shame, our vibration and energy doesn't allow us to have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can go back and heal those things and look at how the other side perceives things, all of our layers to it, and what we can do to move forward can be life-changing. And I think this comes from losing a parent, a child, a partner, anyone in our life that, we feel we have a deeper relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that we just, we're really sad and we feel, we're grieving and we feel sad. But I think when it gets to that deep level, normally to the regret has, like we said, just a history of our past. So we want to be able to go into that. And regret, as we just said, brings in the guilt and shame. And we think, well, wait a minute, where's the shame come in? But the shame may be that we don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to address it. We don't want to lean into it and say, my shame is, should have I let things go differently? Should I taken the higher road? What is it that I could have done?
I feel like where there's guilt, there's always shame.
Yeah, I think so too. I think people look at it as different, but what guilt does is creates a shame. And that's where this all kind of boils up.
When Brene talks about the shame shitstorm, Brene Brown, that is, we see it. Mm-hmm. We see it so often with people who come to connect with their loved ones that they are in guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the regret sits, basically. It really
just
weighs
festers.
Heavy on them. Yeah.
And it can affect so many other aspects of our lives. One of them can even be, let's say you have a loved one that is really sick from cancer, mentally ill, maybe dementia, and part of you wants them to be able to not suffer anymore. You know, you're feeling maybe it's okay for them to cross. And then when they do pass, there's so much regret that you had that emotion at all. And it's
Are you going to share your own story about that?
She's calling me on it. You know, with my husband, for sure, where he died by suicide, and we had been married and had 2 kids and things like that. And his mental illness, he could not honor it or own it or go get help. And we think about this. This was, he's been gone over 15 years. So we're talking 16, 17, 18 years ago when it really hit home. And I kept saying, you've got depression. You need to talk to a doctor. And he would say to me, well, you help a lot of people. Why can't you help me? And I go, this is not a medical thing that I can do. You know, I can understand it. I can be supportive. I can be there for you. I can be a great listening ear, but it's medical help. It's owning it first. And for me, it's like, if you're going to be this miserable for all these years, and he had been unhappy for a long time, more than 3 or 4 years prior. I mean, it could have been even 8 or plus years. And when you're seeing someone that you married, that is the father of your children, struggling every single day, it's heartbreaking. And you can feel guilty for being happy and trying to move on with your life and to make your life the best as possible. For me, it was financially taking care of our family, making sure everyone was okay. Actually, even keeping the secret.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't want anyone to know. And now we're much more vocal about mental health and talking about that it's okay to go seek, medical help. Him being a man that was, raised by a father that was a retired general. I mean, none of this was in our thoughts, in our orbit. So for me, it wasn't that you want him to pass or to die, but there's a part of it that there was a ripple effect. After he died, I found out so many other things. And so there's that feeling of, I shouldn't want that. And it wasn't a desire, but it's a feeling of, I have a belief system that there's an afterlife. And he had a bunch of paperwork about the things that I taught. And he even wrote me a letter that said, I hope you're right about the afterlife.
Wow.
So there are so many layers to it, but you look at even a parent that maybe has dementia, or your partner that has cancer, and you see how hard, you want to fight it and you want to change their life, but there's a part of you that wants them to have peace.
Right.
And that's what I wanted. I thought, if you're not going to acknowledge it here and get help, I just want you to find peace, whatever that looks like.
Right.
So the regret can come that we even thought those things, or maybe we didn't do enough. I think that's what happens so often is, should I have forced it? Should I have talked to different people? And if anyone understands mental health, you can't drag somebody.
Yeah.
If they're under the age of 18, perhaps, but that's a whole nother, ball game, as they would say.
Right.
And I've talked to people that said, I didn't want them to be in pain. I didn't want them to suffer. I couldn't help anymore. So those regrets are, what is it that I could have done differently? And I think we all reflect on that. And I also believe that we're here to help empower people. So when you have someone with a disease, let's even say someone is not willing to go to the doctor and there's something in their health. And I hear this quite often. All the time. I told my spouse, I told my so-and-so to keep going to the doctor, and it took 2 years, and they finally went, and it was stage 4.
Yeah.
And those are the times that a person may say, I wish I would have forced them to go.
Right.
I regret that. And then there's that guilt and shame. And what I try to help people understand is, we can't take control of someone else's journey.
Right.
The only thing we can do is be supportive and be there.
We can urge.
We
can encourage strongly.
I did. I put big boundaries, like, our marriage isn't going to work if you don't go get help. And it was, when you're working with someone or dealing with someone with mental health, and anyone here that understands mental health, it's really challenging because there's no real dialogue that you can go back and forth with. And what I was in my situation was the gaslighting, where conversations kept getting twisted. So I kept feeling like there was something I was doing wrong.
Right.
And they're really good at it. And my husband was very smart, and he was a great negotiator. So taking all those factors together, I always felt that I couldn't do anything, or it seemed like everything I was trying to do got pushed back. And so if you've had these experiences in any aspect of your life with a loved one, then perhaps it would be to understand that maybe there's some shame and guilt because we don't talk about it. And recently I talked to a student that had a similar situation, and we both talked about how you feel that way. And I even read an article where a mother was dealing with her daughter that had severe depression, and they had tried so many different things, and even came to the point of saying, do what you need to do, daughter. Her daughter was under 18. Remember the story?
Yeah. I read that article recently. Yeah. I can't remember.
And I thought
where it was shared.
She goes, people would judge me, and I could feel her. I could feel like if I've done everything, and I've had many conversations with people about this topic. And when she said that to her daughter, it turned a switch, basically saying, do what you need to do, which meant suicide because there were several attempts. Her daughter felt that she was being heard.
Yes.
And she
versus judged.
Felt like she was always doing it wrong. Her mom understood. She's still, to this day, alive. I think she's in her 30s, went to school to be a psychologist, and she's helping people with this now because she understands that, when you have an illness like mental health, it's very different than it is with cancer or another type of disease, right? Even with an auto accident, if you were the driver of the car, things like that, what is, those layers that we go through with regret that maybe someone died at the hands of your choices. There's no right way to deal with someone in that scenario. I think we're all trying to figure it out. All personalities, all of our beliefs are different. But bottom line, when we have regret in the grief process, it can stick with us for so long, and it will affect all of our other choices as we move forward. We may feel like we should be punished. We may feel like we don't deserve love, or people should see our value. We may not make any changes in our life because of fear of what happened then.
I think regrets make us punish ourselves.
100%.
And make us sit and spin in that feeling of regret.
And as we go on and talk about how to help you heal from regret, I've never had, in 60,000 plus readings I've done, anyone come through and discipline someone here and say, you should have done this. Never.
Right.
Never. We carry that on a human level, and it's really from society. So talking about, I wish I would have gone there. You may have a sibling or someone like, you should have done this. You should have done that. And you're like, you don't know my story, my situation.
Yeah. I know part of your belief system is that shit happens and things, our bodies fail. We're affected by chemicals. We're affected by other things in our surroundings. But part of this is that we have contracted with these souls, these other souls in our soul group as well, that we have contracted to learn specific lessons from them.
Correct.
So how does that all intertwine with the regret, but also how does that intertwine with our lessons and the outside influences because I know you don't believe that somebody suicides because that was in their contract.
Correct.
But it's the lessons that you agreed to learn that are attached to their choices.
Correct. So in that one case with my husband, him saying to me, you help a lot of people. Why can't you help me? I mean, that is complete guilt. Right there. I mean, that's major guilt. You help all these other people, but you can't help me. It's also the boundaries of, I can't help everybody. It's learning that. It's the judgment that comes from him and family and the community. Like, well, why didn't you do things differently? If you knew, why didn't you tell us? And, these stories.
Right.
And I look back in my life, because we always look at the patterns when we look at our soul's contracts, is how many times have I been judged or abandoned or told that I was doing it wrong.
Right.
So this was another scenario where I was told by someone that I loved that I was doing it wrong. I was being judged and I was being abandoned. And then the after effect of everyone thinking, well, why didn't you tell the family? And went, well, I did.
Yeah.
It's people chose not to show up in different ways, whatever that is.
Right.
And again, it's not other people's responsibility to intervene. But for me, it was a contract of those same patterns. And what we talk about in soul's contracts is seeing the patterns of our lessons. And when regret or pain and things like this show up the shame, we're here to learn something. Mm-hmm. So if we're seeing those patterns and we're not learning, it will continue to show up harder because we change from pain. We don't change if things are good, but when things are difficult, we look at things in a different way. Even when it comes to someone's death that's significant for us, that it's life-changing, most people that I find, or a big percentage of people find, what do I believe? Mm-hmm. Or they've never had a belief system. So they begin to start feeling the pain of regret and guilt and shame. And
spurs them into search for more.
Questioning. Yeah, to have more questions.
Okay.
So in the Soul's Contracts is, of course, I give so many different insights and tools about the patterns and what we're doing and how many times we felt that way.
What our lessons are, who our soulmates are.
Who our soulmates are, right. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the first things in this is to talk about it, to talk about what our regrets are. But someone's safe.
Yeah.
Whether it's a therapist or someone that does grief work or a friend that really gets it or has been through the same experience. If you're looking for someone that could be very judgmental, you share, they may make you feel worse. Yeah. Well, you know what you should have done? We told you this, or this is what you always do. We don't want to hear that because it's going to take us down that rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. So
make it worse. Yeah.
Make it worse. So what you first want to do is just acknowledge how you're feeling, emotion. And I know this is hard for some people. We have that container and protection around us. So we don't want to share. We want to pretend like it didn't happen. So we're ignoring it. And for a lot of men, it's hard to share an emotion. And that's what was going on with my husband, is like he wanted to keep it all very private and not let anybody know. Mm-hmm. So it could be that you write it down. It might be that you talk to someone that feels safe, but acknowledging how it feels and why. Because if you don't understand why there's the regret, I think it's hard to fix it. It's like, well, there's water in my house. Well, where's it coming from? You need to find out the source. Like, where is that coming from? Mm-hmm. To be honest, I think being honest with yourself, how that's affecting all parts of your life. I think sometimes we think, well, if I don't talk about it and I don't acknowledge it, it's not really controlling my life. And that's not true, because you will start seeing your decisions and not realize that it's related to the regret and the guilt. Mm-hmm. And it's all energy that's attached. And then when we start looking at how it's all aligned and it's affecting us in big ways, we actually begin to sabotage many things in our life. Mm-hmm. We sabotage because we try to punish ourselves. Like you said earlier, we do things to ourselves to make us feel bad about what we did or did not do.
I like that, writing it down, whether you write it in a journal or piece of paper, but there is a ritual that you take many of your students through where they write down whatever their focus is. So in this case, it's their regret and specifically where that regret comes from. And you've had students burn it,
correct,
crumble it, put it in a fireplace and light it on fire to kind of release that to the universe and to release that feeling as a ritual and we don't use let it go, but to allow it to go
for the healing. And I think the other part of it too is the regret may even be an apology to them or an apology to yourself. That's okay too. It's like, because they are hearing and seeing what you're doing. So if part of this is, I'm so sorry I didn't forgive you, or I'm so sorry I wasn't there the way you need, whatever, your consciousness feels like it needs to address, but to honor those things and being honest can start opening up the floodgates. I think what's scary for a lot of people is if you're not used to showing an emotion or sharing an emotion or going deep into the emotion, we get worried that we can't control it. It's going to be a life of its own. And part of it is probably true if it's something really new. The other part of it is you don't want to carry it with you and just keep bearing it, because it will cause health issues. It does have a ripple effect in your life. So that's why having a support system, having a mentor, having a therapist or something to help.
Hire Deb Shepherd.
Yeah. It is what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's when we begin to acknowledge things, it begins to have the opportunity for healing.
Yeah.
The other thing, and we hear this all the time in my sessions, is the length of time. Well, it's been 10 years. And if we think back in our life when we were 5, 6, 7, we always hear what something happened as a child and it still affects us as an adult. I mean, no matter what age we are.
Right.
So if we can realize that time has no matter to the other side, that we can take that time by healing all those past situations. So let's say you had maybe an important grandparent in your life that passed when you were a teenager, and you were a teenager and thought, I don't want to be there. And now you think, oh my goodness, that was so mean to me.
Yeah.
I wish they were here. And that's something I hear too. And I'm like, well, they know what you were supposed to be like at that age, but now they see you and you're different. So you can acknowledge that and have a different connection. So again, it doesn't matter how long they have been gone, but that story. I am bringing this up. I'm bringing this up, and this was not in my notes, was I had a dog that lived a long time. Remember my little poodle, gray poodle?
Dolly.
Mm-hmm. And it brings up energy. And I have regrets from her passing. My parents had her because, I left home and she was a childhood dog. But to this day, there are still times, and that's probably 45 years ago, that I still have that moment where I get regret. Mm-hmm. And I truly, because I have a strong belief system that she knows, she completely knows. But I think it's also looking at regret as a lesson. Looking at regret as, what am I going to do differently next time? Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of animals. I've had a lot. And there's still times I'm still getting better at it. So that's where the regret is a powerful tool, is to look at it as, what am I going to do differently next time?
Yeah.
So don't worry about how long it's been. Don't worry about, will they not be around to know that you're carrying this? When we carry regret for years, it does have a huge impact on our health and our choices and our intuition and how we expect people to be there for us.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. The one thing I had on this was getting help. And that's kind of what we're talking about. One thing is that some individuals feel like, oh, I don't want to go and get to therapy, or I don't want to go ask for help. There are so many different avenues to look for help. Even in a podcast, to start listening to that, to start cultivating that desire to want to heal that. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of individuals that are not comfortable with therapy, not comfortable with a mentor or a coach, what does that look like? It can be life-changing by taking care of yourself and making yourself a priority. And part of that is when you take care of yourself, you're an example to other people that it's okay to do that as well. So it shows a leadership. Mm-hmm. And why can't you get help? I mean, that's what my husband was like, no, I can't get help. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. And I'm like, obviously it is. But also it's having someone that's an outside source to give you insight that you wouldn't see on your own.
Yeah.
And for me, when I mentor, when I start explaining the patterns and what's coming up, they go, oh, they're able to put all the pieces together, which is a powerful tool. So when they move forward in life, they've got all these great tools. Mm-hmm. So
they can understand it when it comes up again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You and I have an interesting thing about forgiveness. And for anyone that's listening to this podcast, if you're wanting to hear about forgiveness, it's an earlier podcast that Dana and I'm going to recommend going to that. We're not ones to say that you have to forgive others. And I know the first thing is, what?
What do you mean?
What do you
Forgiveness is divine.
Yeah. You can't move on. You have to let it go. And in my program, none of that is taught. But what I do believe is it's okay to forgive ourselves.
First and foremost.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's, if you're having that shame and guilt of anything that you've said, didn't do, it's learning to give yourself that grace and forgiveness for that healing.
Mm-hmm. And I think when it's with respect to regret, I think people that don't go through the process of forgiveness or understanding their own feelings around it, that's when regret comes in, is like, oh, but I didn't forgive them before they crossed, or I didn't get their forgiveness before they crossed. I think that's where the regret comes in.
I think that's really well said. Yeah.
But I think also, like in my case, when we talk about forgiveness, I chose to walk away from relationships that were not serving my highest good. I had to walk away from them because they were hurting my psyche and not supporting any sort of growth at all. And that's when I made the choice to walk away from relationships, because they were not healthy.
Correct.
And so I won't have a regret, but I settled that within myself. You know what I mean?
And I think it's forgiving ourselves for staying as long, usually, or not saying what we wanted to say. And we can always play back in our minds, would have, could have, should have, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of regret that we didn't have that opportunity.
Right.
But I truly believe that those were not the opportunities we were supposed to do those things. I mean, it is for the future, but forgiving that how you showed up or didn't show up or how you had to walk away and maybe left things in a really difficult way.
And it's okay to forgive people. I mean, that's not at all
our topic.
It's okay to forgive people for things. It's when somebody purposely hurts you and puts you in a pattern of self-destruction and self-hate, and it's putting you in that place and then gaslighting you into thinking that you have to forgive them to move on. Mm-hmm. That's where
we have a fine line.
Yeah.
That's what like, the whole forgiveness is.
Don't gaslight me and tell me I can't move on unless I go into this deep forgiveness. I can forgive the situation, forgive myself for putting myself there, all the other pieces of it, and allow you to walk on your path and be okay with that.
Support it. And I think the interesting thing is if we don't get, like you said, if someone's dying, they don't forgive us and we don't forgive them, that there's some lingering thing. No, that's
dogma.
That's dogma. Yeah. Thank you. It's people thinking that, it's still there and maybe they're, this drives me crazy. They're stuck or they're in this limbo, but no, they're not. Mm-hmm. They know that there was a contract. They know that there was lessons being learned. They know they were part of that. Mm-hmm. You can still do this work, even though they're in the spiritual form, even though they're not in a physical body.
Yeah. You can still
heal this, connect.
Maybe heal it more so.
And I've heard people do that. Yeah. They said, I have a better relationship with my loved one because they're no longer my teacher. Mm-hmm. And now I have this relationship with the other side and realize what they've done. That's why they don't have any of the regret and they don't hold on to that negativity that was part of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because
it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. This one here I really love. It's about see yourself as human. Mm-hmm. How many of us believe that we're supposed to be perfect?
Well,
I should have known. Mm-hmm. I should have. I should have. I could have. And that's
I probably say that daily.
And even if you're not trying to be perfect, I think there's a acknowledgement of I'm human, I'm learning. And in my belief system and in our belief system is we're here to learn. And in that learning process means we're going to make mistakes for us to have an opportunity to learn. And sometimes we think, well, this happened to me before. I should have known this time. No, it's different circumstances. We don't have it down. We're still in that growth piece. Having that, we hear the saying, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Don't forget that mantra.
Yeah.
You're human. Give yourself the ability to forgive yourself situation and go, what did I get from this? What was my lesson in this?
Give yourself grace, which I have a issue with that word this year, the word grace. But in that respect, I feel like giving yourself grace is really important. You're giving yourself grace to understand and to learn and to unravel the whole process.
And I think we go into this idea of so many different layers, but part of it is when we don't give ourselves grace and we don't realize that we're human and we don't go through these processes that we're talking about. And it doesn't have to be the ones we're recommending, but it could be anything that works for you. Your intuition is suffering. Mm-hmm. And when anyone that's listening to this podcast, most people want to be more intuitive. They want to, they want to feel their loved ones. They want to feel their guides. They want to be able to, tune into it. When we carry that would, could, should, and guilt and regret, we actually don't have our intuition. It's not available because it's pushed so far down and it's covered up in that muck that our intuition is not going to serve you. So when we get confused with making choices in our life, well, is these part of your energy? Is this part of your emotion, your daily emotion of feeling regret and
guilt, shame, regret?
Yeah, that intuition will not serve you. It is bombarded by all these other emotions and feelings. So we don't know which one is our truth. And everything we talk about in our programs is about listening to your intuition. That's your own compass. It's not what anyone else needs to tell you. And people want to have that. We said, there's a time that I could just trust my gut. I knew, I just had this feeling and I can't anymore. There's probably a good chance there's layers of regret.
Yeah.
And with those layers of regret, we have to remove each layer in order to get back to that divine source, to be aligned again.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But it's very possible. Mm-hmm. So when these things come back and we feel, whether it's, a couple of months ago, or whether it's several years ago that we've lost a loved one, and I'm going to include, even though the topic is about someone that has died, because we feel like we can't connect, I think there's also other relationships in our life that can happen that years have come in between.
Like the one I was talking about, between me and my father specifically.
And we look at how many years of, they're still on this planet, but we just know that we can't heal that for because of them, because of us, because of this situation, is to turn
You mean as in heal that relationship in the sense of having a relationship, right?
Because that's usually where people are having the regret. I wish I would have healed the relationship. Right. I wish I would have been forgiven. I wish I would have forgiven them. So it's about their partnership. And this can be in any partnership, whether someone is living or passed. If you can write a bunch of people down and think about even 20 years ago, I regret A, B, and C. I regret making these choices. Think of that as being a toxic element in your soul. And when you look at it as that it's affecting so many different avenues of your life, taking them one by one and dissecting the story will help you heal that, so you're still not carrying it with you. Because if there's, for instance, your father, you probably will never see him physically again. So
I might.
You might.
I won't have a relationship.
Correct. And so those are the parts of the grief. And then there's also, and you're in a different stage because you've done so much work. And I have parents that are still living, that there's still layers to that. But this can go on both. So when people think, well, I don't really have any regret about anyone that died. Okay, what about the other people in your life? So that's why I want to include that if you think it's just someone that's passed, this can be other individuals in your life that you can't maybe talk to them or, sit down and say, do you want to heal this? Because it's not possible either on their behalf, where you are,
right,
location, whatever it looks like.
Whatever the case is.
And I see this a lot with people with family members that have dementia. They had one relationship, and then they have the relationship with that parent or individual that has dementia. And then there's a third relationship of after they passed. And there's so many different layers to the history and the regret that they have. And they may have wanted to heal the relationship before they got dementia. And then they had to make difficult choices about taking care of them when they had dementia. And then they cross over without any of that closure. So this is on so many different levels for anyone that is having those emotions or feelings.
Yeah.
So some of the things too, we talked about, writing the letter, seeing therapy, those type of things is something I would recommend not to ignore. Dana knows that I'm not one that likes to confront. I'd rather ignore as long as possible as I get the eye.
It's called procrastination.
That's the nice word. But I don't want to always confront things. I just, And so if that's part of your personality, I get you. But it's also a period of time of how long do you want to still have that in your body and in your thoughts. So
and affecting your intuition.
Yeah, that's a big thing. So don't ignore that. One of the things I thought was really great is to honor that person in your life, that loved one. So let's say the person passed and they had cancer or mental health or dementia, the three things we've been talking about. Do something to honor that person. Be part of a fundraiser, be part of a charity, do something to give back, because that loved one on the other side will recognize what you're doing for them. And you're going to be able to help somebody else, maybe around your journey, sharing your story, going, I wish I would have known then. To maybe that could be passed on for someone else not to have the regret. I may be on 3 or 4 here, but we'll kind of refresh what we can do. But part of this would be burning the letter. It would do something to honor them. You can even do, they have all these websites now that you can put a book together in honor of that person. I mean, we want to do that for my father-in-law because he he was really kind of an incredible man, but we can do this about anybody. The other thing we can do is change how we move forward. So when we recognize, number one, we have regret, honoring that, saying, I want to heal from this. As things come up with grief or a loss or a change in your life, think about that experience and say, I want to show up differently. And maybe you don't know for sure what that's going to look like or what you're going to do, but even asking yourself that question will help you maybe not ignore it, or maybe say the things that you wanted to say. Seeing a medium and having that connection so part of that journey can begin to change. I think we don't want to keep making the same mistake. They call that insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and having the same results. So find some ways to do it differently as you move forward. And that even includes in the healing process. So if you're one that just ignores it, or you're a person that says, I don't want to deal with it, or it was their fault, they were always the one that was angry, whatever the blame game is try to look at tools to change how you tell your story.
Well, doesn't the blame game really make you look like a victim versus 100%. Taking part in the process?
Yeah.
So take your power back.
Yeah.
Stop blaming them. Take your power back. That, to me, that's what that feels like, is like
100%.
I don't want to blame. Here's the situation, black and white. I had a piece in this. Take your power back, own it, and
change.
Yeah.
I remember telling a student at one time that I said, your stories, I feel like you're always the archetype, the victim. And boy, did that not go over very well. We don't want to see.
Was there a fit?
We don't want to see ourselves as the victim. But when we understand that that's what we're doing, that we're not getting our power back, we're not changing how we show up and how we can change that perception. Like, what was the gifts from that, situation? What did I learn from that? And that's where the power shows up for us. And that's where intuition begins to change. And it heals your life. You realize, wow, how much of this I've been carrying, how much of this has been affecting my choices, which creates
that big rock that you carry on your shoulders. Yeah.
Yes. And how we've like, I feel so heavy and my shoulders hurt and I'm so stressed. I wonder why. I really hope that when anyone listening goes back and thinks about their regrets in life, can begin to take the layers of each of them and understand what regret brings. And if you're thinking, well, I don't really have any regrets, is there some shame? Is there some disappointment? Is there some feeling of failure? They're sort of all in the same theme. That, we just maybe use different words. And if you're wanting your intuition, you want your heart to heal, and you want to open yourself up, these are some simple things that we can do.
And healing relationships with those who've crossed over, even though they're gone.
Yeah, they're still right with you. Way more than you think. Well, thank you. And also, this topic is something we talk about in my mentoring program called The Solutions. And in there, we talk about the soul's contracts, which answers so many of these things. So if you're listening today, our doors are open to take new students. And we only do this once. Now we're doing it twice a year. So it's only available twice a year. Check it out, because I'm here to help. I love to help people understand this and heal from it and get their power back. So thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope it inspired you. If you enjoyed our conversation, make sure you subscribe so that you get notified of new episodes. And let's get connected. Visit debshepard.com for more insights, support, workshops, and to book a session with me. And finally, always remember, your loved ones in spirit are just a thought away. Even though they're on the other side, they're always by your side.